Today we'll be talking about hierarchies, and so I prepared some slides for this. Okay, so here we go. So talk about visualization of hierarchies, and so basically hierarchies, usually you think of hierarchies as a tree, like here, so of course people would try to replicate this kind of appearance in an actual graphical representation. So this is actually a tree modeled as a tree. I mean, you can lay out the graph any way you want, right? So here they basically try to shape it as a tree, which is sort of friendly to the hierarchical organization, so as things get a little more bushy towards the end and a little less bushy towards to the root. So, you can shape it as a tree if you like, right? So this is like one way to represent a hierarchy. Not very common, I can't say, but it's sort of, it's a way to do it. Another one, try to take this a step further and put some semantics into this hierarchy. So here, for example, this is a map the publications of a particular author to a tree. So the major leaves are the papers, minor leaves are the co-authors, the height is the time. So this is the recent stuff, and this is the earlier stuff, right? Fruit are the comments. So if you got more comments, it looks more. The paper size or color is the number of citations. So it's like, I'm not sure if it's the green or the red that has more citations. I think the green. And journal papers on the right and conference papers on the left. Okay, so this author here on the left-hand side wrote a lot of journal papers. On the one on, I didn't have to write many conference papers. And the one on the right has more citations maybe. So, this is like a way to sort of use like a metaphor that people are familiar with and try to make graphics, make a visualization out of it, so you can sort of engage with it. And you feel like sort of you want to really look at it and be drawn to it. So it becomes like sort of interesting to look at, which visualization is supposed to be. Right? It's supposed to be not just looking at something like this. This is mildly interested, but this is kind of interesting. You try to further understand what this means. Then you can sort of see about these particular authors. For example, here, this is a very productive author on the left, right? There's a lot of journal papers, a lot of conference papers. This is kind of like your colleague from next door who is really, really famous, and this is like an unproductive researcher, right? Someone who doesn't write a lot of papers, probably didn't get tenure. I don't know. This is like the famous colleague at next door who is like always getting all the awards, right? And this is like someone else, and this may hopefully not yourself. And these are like the very unproductive people. It's kind of like an interesting conversation starter, kind of like, it's not, it's interesting, and it makes you think about it and makes it's comparable, and you can sort of relate to it because you've seen trees before and you know what a good tree looks like and what the bad tree looks like, right? So anyway, this is sort of something I wanted to show. Then there is like other people that try to use this botanical inspiration to make this visualization. For example, this one here is a little more abstracted than the one before, right? This was really the leaves and how green you make them and how many leaves they have. This is a little more abstracted, but it's more semantic, right? Now, this is for a hard drive, that try to take a hard drive and represent it as a tree, with the different levels of a hard drive. So many files would be like this kind of fruit here, with lots of facets on it. Fewer files would be a smaller fruit. One file is just a single one right here. It sort of gives you an idea, like when you quickly want to find out, like where most of my files are. Maybe you want to make some space on your hard drive. You can sort of look at this. It's kind of entertaining. It's 3D, right? And it's sort of interesting to look at. And again, it's more interesting than a regular tree, right? Like a graph that you just with edges and nodes, right? This is a little more entertaining, So if you look some, eye candy visualization, this is the kind of the thing you can use. And here's like more things. the blue are the PDF files and the red are the image files. So you can quickly see like these are the PDF files. You can zoom in, and you can look at it, and the other image files. You sort of know where your images are and your videos are, and you know where your text is, right? You can sort of read this. So again, it's like a life or botanical inspired visualization of a tree, because trees are, botany has a lot of trees, right? A lot of hierarchical, lots of plants have like this hierarchical hierarchical decompositions. So they let this kind of metaphor lends itself really well for trees as well, right? So map things that come in nature. Another one here, so let's go a little more conventional, okay, after speaking about these. Let's go a little more conventional. So this is a very standard layout, okay? So you have the root node here, three, children from this root node, and each of these subnodes have a lot more children. So it tells you a little bit like that you really need to plan when you draw when you draw a tree. You really need to make space and plan ahead, right? To make sure things are not overdrawn and things are sort of organized in a certain way that you can see everything at the same time. So here, basically you have to if you draw this something like this, you better draw first the leaf nodes in a straight line. So you can sort of make plans here, then here's like that many, you need this much space here, you need much space here, this much space here. Then you can fan them together, create the parent, and then you can fan those together and make another parent, right? So that way you can sort of quickly see, basically when you draw, I remember when I first got into this graph or network visualization or tree visualization, I thought it's pretty easy to do, why not, right? But actually there's a lot of planning involved to draw the right tree and the right way that people can see what the structure is, right? So it's not that simple. This is very simple. You just find out how many leaves each subnode has and then organize that in the vertical axis and then connect it, right? Draw it like basically bottom up. Then this is a dendrogram. Dendrogram is often used for classification hierarchies or like families and like, hierarchies. So this is a typical dendrogram. Also, oftentimes it either can be a dendrogram or dendrogram with an R. Both of that is correct. You sort of see Arctic fox and foxes here, and there's more foxes here, and then there's other different foxes. And here are the bears, right? And you can sort of see how they go together. So the Arctic fox and this other fox here, they sort of form a very tight family, and then these ones fox different family, and this is another family. They sort of, so by similarity of the genome, or you can sort of group them together. And basically, this is determined by similarity. As the similarity gets less and less, so the most similar things you connect directly, and then you group that together, and then you take the next similar things and connect it together, and so on. So basically, you sort of build this from the bottom up, just like in clustering that we learned about in clustering, right? You basically do the same thing here. You build it from the bottom up and create this hierarchy or dendrogram where, as you go out, you can sort of see how the different species have diversified, right? So here's a 4 million years ago, 7 million years ago, 10 million years ago, right? So you can sort of see how they started to develop, how they evolved. Basically, more and more things evolved. Subspecies were evolved from those species here. The bear split first. Out here and here, right? So the bears are here, and all the foxes are here. You can sort of see as time progressed, more and more diversity in the animal kingdom evolved, right? You can sort of nicely see this in this timeline according, and then the dendrogram as it is here. Then birds and dinosaurs. That's a very famous dendrogram or evolution dendrogram. You can sort of see the dinosaur here. And then this is then you can sort of see how the birds came about and the ones that couldn't fly, right? It's sort of stuff you can see in the Natural History Museum often. It's very nice. You can sort of really study this and really look at the different pictures and see if you can actually see the similarities or dissimilarities, right, just from the anatomy, right, the way this looks like. You know, it's very interesting. All starts here, and then Tyrannosaurus, these kind of things came, and here came the birds, right? You can sort of see how they slowly became birds, right? In the beginning, they fell accidentally off the tree, and they found out it's a really good way to jump across the tree. But if you just had better wings, you know, and then they start growing better wings, and they could actually fly even beyond the trees, right? You can really see how these species developed, like from one another, right? And this is like typical dendrogram organized by time. You know, this is like a typical class hierarchy that's evolving. It gets bushier and bushier towards the right. Okay, so it's like that dendrogram. Then when you look at this dendrogram on the right-hand side, right, it's very hard to really see where the structures are, because once this gets too bushy, right, once there's too many tree leaves, it gets really hard to oversee, right? Because, you know, vertical space is kind of like, you know, it's not easy to get, right? So it's all organized in this sort of dense kind of organization. So what a better way to do this is really a radial representation. What's nice about radial representation, I think we talked about it before, is that as the hierarchy spreads out, more and more leaves are towards the outside, right? Here's the core, the root node, right, where there's not a lot of diversity, and then it goes out, and it actually spreads out, and which is exactly what the circle does, right? As you move out, the circle diameter gets, circle diameter gets bigger, and the surface of the circle, or the perimeter of the circle gets bigger too, circumference gets bigger too. And then this is exactly where you need the space, right? You need the space out here where there is more species, right? So this is a perfect way to represent hierarchies in a very good way, in a very space-saving way, right? We're using a radial representation. Okay, so we just have to, you know, and you can always see just by radius, you can sort of see where branches have resulted in similar level of similarity, right? You can really look out, right? And then you can have a lot of information around it. So it's a really neat way to look at hierarchies using this sort of circular representation. Okay, so circle is good also because the eye doesn't have to wander a lot, right? You basically look at the root node, then you sort of move around in the, you know, explore the circle around the bound, around the circumference, right? It's a very nice, very convenient way to explore the data, right? You can always go back to the root and go to take another branch. You can compare the different branches. You know, like it's really nice way to look at data when you represent them in a radial fashion. So here is like, you know, this has become actually quite popular, the radial representations. For example, this is a chord diagram, you know, where you try to look at connections between several entities. So basically here are the different entities, West Asia, Africa, East Asia, and so on, and the migration patterns that they had, right? So you can see like from South Asia, a lot of migration happened to West Asia, right? And then some of them just moved around within South Asia, and then, you know, Soviet Union, a lot of people moved from here, and then, you know, and so on, right? And then Africa moved a lot inside, but in here went to Europe, right? This is sort of a typical migration pattern from Africa to Europe, and then within Europe was a lot of migration, then, and also from Latin America was some migration. So you can really see these migration patterns. Again, it's a circular representation, a radial representation. So you can really, organize the different geographical areas around the circumference, right? And then the interaction between these happens within the circle, right? Inside the circle, right? Where there's a lot of space, right? You can just sort of traverse across, you can follow them, right? So that's a really nice way to see connections, to like connections of different entities. Okay, so here's a more complex one. You know, this is like much more complex, right? So now you have a lot of things around, have a very complex migration patterns. You know, lots of things happening. It's very hard to follow really what's going on, right? Because everything is crisscrossing across, right? You can use color to help you a little bit, right? But still, it looks like spaghetti, right? Very hard to see what's really going on. So here, I'm gonna give you like a representation that helps you this, right? So basically this is called edge bundling. Like by edge bundling, we can bring some order and organization into this crazy clutter that you can see here. So let's look at some example what the edge bundling really does. So this is a hierarchy of the Flare Action Grip Visualization Library. Don't mind what that is. But anyway, there's like a hierarchy of a software library. There's a lot of methods here, and then they have groups, and they can be used with one another, but they're organized in folders, and each folder is subdivided in subfolders, and so on. This typical way in which you can basically represent them nicely as a circular kind of representation. But still, you got a lot of things going on, and then it's really hard to really see, because there's so many straight lines, really hard to see really like how much is really there and so on, right? So if you want to just see the dependencies among the libraries, but a primitive way is just a straight line. You just go from here to here, and then you bridge over this, right? You can sort of see, okay, there's like a very different group. This routine and this group is in very different groups, so it just, you cross it over, but you have to really look here and then look here. Or you can actually follow this. You can follow all the way to the root node. Well, it's very different. You have to actually, in this hierarchy, you have to go all the way to the root node, come back down, right? So you can use this sort of representation here, which is actually a bundling line. Basically, it's created by bundling this together and going here. So what is edge bundling? Okay, so let's talk about this some more. Edge bundling actually is just, it basically tries to group. It tries to start at individual lines and then try to bundle them together and keep them together as much as possible, and then break them back up into terminals. Okay, and you do this in a hierarchical manner, right? So if things join very early, you bundle them very early. If things join later, you bundle them later, right? And they basically become thicker and thicker until they separate apart again, right? So when you compare this and this looks a lot easier to see, because you can really see how many lines join in these particular routines, right? How are the dependencies, right? This dependency graph, right? How are dependencies? There's a lot of dependencies here within this, right? And you can also see where the major dependencies are. You can sort of, here's a lot of dependencies here, a little bit out of it. This is a really, really one that really wants to go across. This one too, right? So this is hard to see what really are the magnitudes of these dependencies, and here it's much easier, right? By edge bundling, okay? So edge bundling, another way to use edge bundling is if you have these original graph. Again, it's a big mess, just like here, right? But this is like a regular graph, very general graph, but it's still a big mess. So you can redraw this. You can actually extract the hierarchy, right? You can find out, can try to look at each node and see where they're connected, start to build a hierarchy and extract it from that. This is basically something that comes from here. You can fix the no root and look at it like this, right? But again, this suffers under the same problem, right? Like that's what we had here, right? You want to see a little more clearly how really these hierarchical relationships really work. And then you can use edge bundles again for this. So you can relate Kenneth Lay with these companies, for example, or Kenneth Lay with these other executives, right? And you sort of see how many connections he really had, right? Kenneth Lay, the former head of Enron, for example, right? You can really see this quickly by edge bundles, right? So, it brings clarity to the visualization, okay? Again, here's another example about this. So edge bundling really is controllable by this, what's called by this tension parameter beta. It's represented by splines. We'll see in a second what splines actually are. So let's just believe me. A spline is actually a curved line that you can control, where you can control the curvature, okay, by this tension parameter beta. Like a spline that has no tension at all, it's like just a line, a linear line. If it gets more curvy and curvy, very tense, right, the beta is higher. Okay, low value, low level node connectivity, and then high value is pretty high level information. So as you make the beta 1, you can bring a lot more curvature to this, and you really try to tie these lines together so they form very tight clusters. So it's obviously, this is really, the left one is really hard to read. Then you add a little of tension, a little more, and then get really good clarity, right? Of course, now it's not so easy anymore, distinguish the lines, but at least you see where they end, right, and where they end up, okay? So this is another example of edge bundling, where you have these individual hierarchies here in a call graph. And instead of having them individual hierarchies like this that are just connected, individual radial diagrams, you fold them out, right? This is where you just fold it out. This guy here folded out, this guy here folded out, this guy here folded out. So now basically unified these separate hierarchies and made them like one, right? And then used edge bundle to connect them, right? So it's just another way, to show these hierarchies instead of individual hierarchies, which can be meaningful. You can spread them out like this, okay? This is another example. If you have a radial highlight without the edge bundling, and this is with the edge bundling, right? It's without with the edge bundling. So let's talk a little bit about like how do you actually make these lines? Like I told you that you can do hierarchically, group them together, and then depending where you are in the hierarchy, you can bring them together. But let's talk about how do you actually create this curvature. Okay, so you have to know a little bit about splines. So some of you may have taken geometric modeling, have learned about how splines work. For those who did not, I'll give you a little bit of a primer. So basically, a spline is a smooth curve defined by control points. Okay, so this is just this is like basically you need to know something about parametric interpolation. Okay, so basically we represent a curve, just like a general curve, present them as a parametric line, right? So here, the parameter t is 0 here and 1 here. Okay, 0 here and 1 here. And as I move the t, this parametric t from 0 to 1, I'm going to start using these control points. There's P1, P2, P3, and P4. I'm gonna try to make the line go closer to this control points. So here this line once is attracted to P2 but doesn't reach it. Now this line is attracted to P3, doesn't reach it, and then it's attracted to P4. The way I can basically represent P1, P2, P4 multiple times, then the line will actually go there. So that's a small that's a small detail, but by duplicating the P1 and P4, I can actually make the line go to it. Depending how many times I replicate a point, I can actually make the line go closer to it. So it's kind of like an affinity to that point, right? And here I've multiplied it multiple times. I applied it multiple times. So basically, when you look at these control points, they form like this sort of piecewise continuous, piecewise linear curve, right? P1 connect them together. So this is like the control skeleton, okay? So there's different kinds of splines called the Bézier spline or B-spline, okay? So Bézier was a French guy who actually was working for Renault, right? When you look at cars, they look very smooth, and then basically these smooth cars, they needed some way to design these cars. So Bézier invented the spline to basically design these curved cars, like these curved, these curved bodies, car bodies, right? So it's like, so they look good, right? They're like nicely curved. They're based continuous, C2 continuous, and basically look, have a nice reflection of the light that comes in from the sun, right? And then people like curved lines better than they like edgy lines, right? And then so that was like similar to cars, right? Some cars are boxy, but most cars have these sort of nice smooth edges, right? They look good to the eye, right? So let's talk about this more, right? So this B-spline curve is defined as follows, right? Here's the control points, and this is the spline function, okay? So you'll have like these n control points, pk, and then per control point, you're gonna use this pk, and k moves on, right? And then d is the dimensions, and t is this parameter t, right? Remember, we're gonna use this parameter t, okay? So n is the total number of control points. Typically, it's this could be any number, right? So here we used seven control points, and here we used 4, right? And d is the order of the curve. Typically, it's 3 or 4. This is the d, okay? This determines the continuity, right? Continuity, like if you make on a d, if you make d equals 1, then it's going to be, going to be like it'll have like sharp edges, right? And if you use higher, they're going to be more smooth, right? BKD is a uniform B-spline blending function. We call that the blending function. We'll see in the next slide what the blending function is, and PK are the control points. So each BKD is only non-zero for small range of T values. So the curve has local control. So as you move on, there's these blending functions associated, right? But they're only valid within a certain range. That's why you can slowly go to P3 from P1, right? So that's why slowly, so these points are only active for a little bit, right? P4 here is active, so the draw is drawn here. And then P6 comes into the picture, the curve is drawn here. Okay, and these are these basically, this is this matrix that the B-spline coefficients are stored, and this is this parametric T. Basically, you use T power 3, 2, and 1. This is a 3. This is degree of 3, right? And then basically you multiply these coefficients by these T values, right? And these are the control points, and you bring this all together, and they'll give you this particular location X. Okay, where X is basically a two-dimensional coordinate, right? It's a point in space. Okay, this is a point. This is a two-dimensional curve, right? This is a two-dimensional coordinate. These can also have 3 dimensions, but because of the 2 dimensions here. Okay, so T is the parametric variable, and we talked about this. So these are these blending functions. Okay, these blending functions are always the same. Okay, and this is really where the splines differ oftentimes. So this is the B-spline. This is basically a B-spline blending function. It looks almost like a Gaussian, but it's a B-spline. Okay, which is defined by these numbers here, right? This is basically, it tells you exactly, you know, where the T goes, and this is the T, right? So basically, you go multiply these point locations, which are here, by these coefficients, and which are and this T exponentiated, and then you generate these x values here, these curve values, and you just range the T, it'll give you this continuous curve. Okay, so this is basically just like kind of what you would get, right? Like this is these different bending functions. These bending functions are really multiplied now by the control point, right? This is basically multiplied by the control points. Here, these are just the raw bending functions, and here I multiplied them, or not I, but I took the figure from, multiplied this, the height of the curve by the actual value of the point of this control point. Okay, this is a one-dimensional spline. Okay. So P1 is bigger, P2 is smaller, and P3 is smaller. You can sort of see like how this smoothly, and this blends together, right? You basically always add, this is the T, right? You just, any T value, you take this plus this. For here, you take this plus this plus this. And this will give you basically the curve, how high it is, right? And so this is essentially very basic, principles of B-splines, or of any kind of splines, right? You basically take these control functions, multiply them by the control point, take the basis function, multiply them by control point, sum it together for a given T, and then create the coordinates, right? So here the coordinate was one-dimensional, right? But you can also have, you know, you can have a two-dimensional point or three-dimensional point, right? You can just create a curve in this space, okay? Here's a little bit of illustration from this. You can clearly see this, how this works, right? As you move along the skeleton, right, you multiply these by these basis functions, and you slowly create this spline curve. Okay, so it's a really nice concept, right? You know, it's also visualization, right? Because now I tell you how this can be used in parallel coordinates too. Right, so this actually those line bundles are also created like this, but you can also create it for parallel coordinates. So these are typical parallel coordinates, right, where things are like just connected by piecewise linear curves, piecewise linear polylines, right? And this is when you use splines for it, right? You basically try to take these lines here. This is work I did with Kevin McDonald, like 2008, quite some time ago. Like when this stuff was just coming out, you know, basically just try to take these lines here and bundle them together. And what this buys you is essentially gives you it removes this problem with overplotting, right? So now they're much more focused in the middle, right? So you can actually see things behind it, right? Of course, when things are completely uncorrelated, there's not much you can do, but still a little more. But but if it's correlated, if there's some structure to it, you can reveal the structure better by bending the lines towards the center of this cluster, right? Towards the center of this. So this is basically try to find the center line that defines the cluster and bend the lines toward that center line. Okay, that's basically how you do it. So here's like somehow in the mathematical terms. If this is a line here with midpoint M, this is the cluster line, right? This is like one line of a cluster of lines. Like this is one line of a cluster of lines. This is the midpoint of the cluster. You try to warp this M here, this midpoint, down, defined by this spline function. These are control points. This is a control point. This is another control point, and the midpoint is another control point. And then basically you try to control the curvature of this line, of this curve here, by these control points here. So this, and this will try. And this is basically duplicated, right? So it does it because we want it to go through it, right? All we want is like get the midpoint curved, so it goes down like this. So depending how far it is away, it gets curved a little closer or less close, right? And you can define this by this tension parameter. Okay, so you can define if you have more tension, you can let them go a little more, right? The more tension, you have them much more defined, right? You can have a slider to change that, right? It's pretty fast, right? You can change that. So this is a really good way to sort of give some quick sort of make these things easier to see and recognize correlations easier and also recognize structure easier than this, right? This is really hard. This is the kind of stuff that makes people look away from parallel coordinates. But when you make it look more like this, people are more willing to look at it. So this edge bundling really has revolutionized a lot of the visualization world, right? Because now you can really actively remove clutter, right? You can really bundle things together where they don't really need to be different, right? And give clarity to the picture and then have it, and have it more and remove the clutter, right? So it's a pretty good way. So edge bundle is a really hot topic, and the D3 supports it, right? There's a lot of these templates that have edge bundling in it, right? You can just run it, right? So it's not that simple. So is there any questions about any of this? Then you guys are welcome to chat anytime. I'm happy to chat window open. I'm looking at it. So another technique that I want to talk about is like opacity blending. So, this is kind of hard to see where things are really coming from, right? Because everything has sort of the same opacity and thickness. It's hard to really see which are the local edges and which are the edges that come from another cluster of nodes, right? So what you can do is you can render long curves with lower opacity or high transparency, and a short curve with high opacity or low transparency. Okay, basically all you have to really measure is the length of a curve, right? That's simple, and then map it to opacity transfer function, right? This is not that hard to do. And then every time you have a long curve, you just draw the whole curve with a low opacity, and whenever you have a short curve, you draw it with high opacity, and then you can sort of quickly see local neighborhoods and these highways that connect the local neighborhoods, right? Very easily seen. So this is much better visualization than this, right? So you can really make out structure, and you can sort of get a sense for how dense the local neighborhood really is, right? So this is much better, right? So this is just by simple trick, just measure the length of the lines, map the long curves to low opacity, draw them with low opacity, and draw the small short curves with high opacity. And that's it, right? And that's all it does. Here is another example, alpha blending. You can see sub bundles here. You just see the, try just look basically only make the lines that are at the periphery of the bundles, make them thick, and everything else make them not so thick. Right, then you can sort of see the individual dynamics of the bundles. You can see how dense the bundles really are because you map them to low opacities. You can sort of see through, and you can see the background white behind it, and that just sort of gives you some idea. If there's more white shining through, then it's not as dense as if there's less background shining through, right? So it gives you a really good idea on this, right? So it's simple alpha blending, okay? Simple alpha mapping. It's also very nice. Another way to see hierarchies more like of a flow, our Sankey diagrams, which I show here. This is really more like of a, remember this first visualization here, there was really, well, you could sort of see, where is it? This first chord diagram, there was, you had to sort of follow it and then, but you didn't really see where it went, right? You could only see like one migration, right? One level of migration here, that was it, right? So now if you want to see multiple levels of migration, then you can use this Sankey diagram, which I plot here, right? You can sort of see, for example, money went from and went to, right? The money went from here to here and then it went from here to here. There's also these sort of different migration pattern, USA to England and went to South Africa and then China, right? So this sort of like, as it sort of the continuous migration from one country to the next, right? Flow of energy from source to destination across multiple hubs, flow of goods from place to place. And then same thing, you abstract it with this sort of, filled curve, right? It's just a filled band, right? And then you use different color to indicate a little bit, to distinguish, to see the progression of it, right? And we start out with brown and then move to purple. So it's basically just like the chord diagrams where you give different hubs a different color. And you can sort of see this went to the green and here this went to the blue and so on went to the red again, right? So, this is a very popular technique to see flow by Sankey diagram. It's easy to understand, right? You can really quickly see there's a wide band of flow and there's thinner flow, right? You can really quickly see this and then so on, right? This is a pretty nice way to sort of see these kind of flows. Then another way to see hierarchies, back to the hierarchies, another way to see hierarchies, the Sunburst display, which I showed you before, right? You basically have a root node and then it breaks out into these different levels. And again, each of these levels here breaks out in multiple other levels and each of these levels here break out. And you can sort of see by extension, right, which levels have a wider depth of the hierarchy and which ones have not so much depth, right? So this one here doesn't have a lot of depth. This one here has a lot of depth, right? There's a lot of diversity. And the same thing, you can sort of also see how many members are there, right? The thicker you make it, the more members are there. So it kind of gives you a little bit of an impression how much quantities are in these different leaves and how they're divided into different leaf nodes, right? So this is like a Sunburst display. Very, very popular in visualization paradigm, right? And then I think the D3 node that you have, you can even click on one of them and it folds down or expands back out, right? I think we showed that before, right? So you can click on this, then it will fold in, and you click on it again, it'll fold out, right? You can start just a root node and click on it to see these guys. Then you go here and click on this, you see the children, and so on, right? And then click again, it folds back down. So you can sort of manage focused interest. I think I showed you, I don't think I have it linked here. Another one is the Sunburst display, but now it's partition of unity. This is like not partition of unity, where you really try to emphasize how big each leaf node really is, right? And then you can never really optimize this for unity because some leaf nodes are thicker than others, right? But here you try to sort of express it as a percentage, right? So here's the root node. Now these are the percentage of the root node get assigned to these different leaves, and then again, what is the percent that gets assigned to this different leaves and so on. So this is more of a percent view, like more of a pie chart, than this is more of a hierarchy, right? So this is basically like a multi-level pie chart, if you will, right? There's the inner level, there's the outer level, and it sort of folds out like this, right? It's sort of like a multi-level pie chart, if you wish. Yeah. So also very often used. Okay, Sunburst visualization. Next one is this Treemap. So Treemap is basically kind of like a pie chart, but more like a pie chart plus. It's this is actually a very famous visualization. Treemaps have been around for some time, developed by Ben Schneiderman. Remember Ben Schneiderman, Overview in Detail on Demand, former PhD graduate from Stony Brook. He made a lot of contribution to the visualization field, and he also invented the tree map. Okay, so tree map basically tries to show you quantities in a two-dimensional form, right? So this is basically the whole US, I think, and these are the different states, I think, like sized by population. So California is really big, and then New York a little smaller. Whereas Wyoming is very small, right? So there's Wyoming. So Texas is also big. Tennessee, this is the South region, West region, Midwest, New England. Okay, you can sort of quickly see like which are the big states: New England, New Jersey and Pennsylvania, right? And so Wyoming is too small. I guess you can't see it. So and so basically it's a way to show quantities in terms of boxes. And the box is a good metaphor because a two-dimensional screen is a box by itself, right? So it really makes good use of the space, right? It's like, as opposed to these radial displays that try to focus your attention much, but only put things in a small space. Treemap is sort of territorial, tries to basically use everything, every pixel available, and turn it into information display, right? So here you try to focus it, and here you try to use all of the screen, right? And so how do you make these tree maps? Okay, it's actually very easy to make. The basic tree map is very easy to make. Okay, all you will do is basically, you come up, you try to measure, how many elements are there in total? Like how many files are there in total in my disk? Or how many stocks do I have in total? Or how many people live in the United States, right? So this basically here. And then you divide it up into different portions, right? Here we divided it up into different regions: South regions, West region, Northwest, and so on, and Middle New England. Here I only chose 2. So four elements go here, 6 elements go here, and then, here now I'm dividing New England up into 3 different states, Massachusetts and so on, right? And here's some, the West, California, Oregon, whatever, like this, and divide up how many people live in each state, or how many people live in each of these leaves, right? Or how many elements are going in each of these leaves. And then this is how I start out, right? This is how I start out. Now I'm trying to encode it into this tree map, okay? So the way I do it is I make a box. Any kind of box is fine, any kind of box is fine. A, right? This is the big box A. And then I take 4 and 2, 4 and 6, and divide this horizontal line into something that is 4 here and 6 here. Basically, just whatever, if this is 10, then this is 4 and this is 6. Okay, so basically this is, this is 40% and this is 60%. And then I call this box B, and I call this box C. And then I'm going to go and take this box B and divide it in the vertical sense. Okay, like I will try to take this line here and divide it 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, right? Accommodate basically the same vertical length to what the proportions were of these leaves. Okay, call that F, call that E, and call that D. Do the same thing for the right-hand side, 4 for G and 2 for H. And if I have more levels, I just keep doing this, right? So if D has a few more leaves, then I subdivide again in the X direction. If E has more leaves, I subdivide E along the X direction. If F has more leaves, I divide F in the X direction. And G, and I keep doing this. I basically always switch from X to Y, X to Y, X to Y, X to Y. Okay, keep doing this until basically no leaf cannot be subdivided anymore. Okay, so basically, if I have a very, very complex hierarchy, then I get something like this. This is the tree map for stock portfolio, right? So it's very, very large. So Charles Schwab, I think they use Treemap a lot. I've seen commercials and advertisements for Treemaps that they use to sort of see stock portfolios. It's a very simple, you can really see how balanced it is, and you can color it by how much they return, what the profitability is, and then basically, stuff like this, whatever it is. Sizes map to market cap, yellow boxes are investors' holdings. Okay, this is all all the stocks available, all the different kinds of stocks, right? And this is what the investor has. So you can see I have a little bit of this here, I have a little bit here, services, a little bit technology, a little bit basic materials. I can basically see financial stock, common goods, right? I can, industrial goods. I can sort of see, okay, these are the different stocks I could have, and how much they, worth, and I can sort of see how diversified I really am, right? So obviously, this guy has a lot more in consumer goods than in technology, right? And so you can, that's why Charles Schwab uses them, right? Because you can really quickly get an overview where you stand in the overall kind of sense, right? By using these Treemaps, and it really fills the screen, right? Basically, the whole screen is full. You make optimal use of the pixels you paid for, right? As opposed to radial diagrams where you try to focus. Here you basically use everything and really fill it, right? So the problem with Treemaps is that, as you draw the lines, as you draw these lines, because not every box has equal number of lines, right? So here, this is a line here. This is basically the bounding lines, right? And they have a certain thickness too, and they take away from the subdivision, right? And since these boxes start to be irregularly arranged as you keep subdividing along X and Y, there's sometimes more vertical lines or horizontal lines than in other boxes, and they take away from the subdivision space, right? So eventually, these boxes, the size of these boxes, are no longer exactly the equivalent to the size that Leaf actually had in the hierarchy. That's just a basic shortcoming, actually. So Jacques van Wyk, he did this kind of what's called cushion tree map to get away from these lines. Basically, completely abandon the lines, and the only thing you leave out, you try to use to separate the boxes is color, right? But then when you have color, it's kind of hard to really see because of color contrast problems, where it's hard to see sometimes distinguish where the boxes really are, where's the boundaries. Sometimes the boxes look very similar. So he invented these cushion maps, right, where he tried to sort of put specular highlights on these boxes, right? Instead of having just plain, simple, just plain color, he models them as a warped surface, right? As a surface that has a dome on it, right? And then you use a shading to bring that out, right? Like a specular highlight, okay? And then, that undoes some of these problems, right? Because no longer do you have lines, and you can really see individual things quite nicely, right? So it's like a nice way of computer graphics trying to overcome some of the problems that basic information processing creates, right? So that's a nice way. Then disk drives, so you can get this. There's like different programs have this, right? In Windows, there's a WinDirStat, uses these Treemaps. Linux is something called KDirStat. Under the Mac, it's called disk inventory, right? They all have these Treemaps to be used for to show you quickly, give you an overview how your disk is split, how your disk is broken up, right? I never understood why there is not just in Windows a basic button that you can just use, or anywhere like on a file browser, just a basic button that can quickly reveal these Treemaps, right? I don't understand why they don't implement that, right? Because it's such a fantastic way to see how these hierarchies, and quickly see, wow, here's here's a big segment. I can just click on that and and remove it, because this is really, you can basically quickly see where are my big files, and maybe remove them or store or save them somewhere on a USB or on a backup disk, right? Or where are a lot of files, because otherwise you have to traverse all of these file trees, right? And it's very hard to really see, because there is no mapping really of size. And when you look at the file browser, right, and this really shows it this really nicely. So I have this, every time I run out of disk space, then I look at my disk like this and really figure out like where are my big space hogs, and remove them, right? And quickly, and then after creating this, in like few minutes, I know exactly what to do, right? Without having to look at the file browser. So My last part of the lecture really is to make you aware of this problem, that if you have a tree map like this, that is just a general tree map like this, it's really hard to compare, like if you build a tree map from like this with this very basic algorithm, right? Like very, very basic, where you just split down X and Y. Sometimes you can create these very longish kind of boxes. Sometimes when you're lucky, they become square. Sometimes they're longish like this in the X direction. Sometimes they're longish in the Y direction. So very hard to really figure out, compare the different nodes, because sometimes they're square, sometimes they're long in this way, in X or Y directions. It's really hard to figure out which nodes are actually the same, right? Where, which stock, disk, here it's a little bit squarified, but which ones are really the same? Is this long one the same than this one here? It's hard to say, right? So there's an algorithm that uses squarification, okay? Try to make these nodes somewhat square. You can't fully make them square, but you can try as hard as you can, okay? Then of course this is an optimization that doesn't really work anymore, like in the simple way that I showed you here. You have to do a little more. You have to basically split up the nodes, continue like recursively, but at the same time try to preserve the square, okay? Or like preserve the aspect ratio. Try to make the aspect ratio as big as make it close to 1. Okay, so so this is called squarified tree map. Okay, squarified tree map. There's also slice and dice, where you just only go in the X direction, or strips, where you try to to stripify it. You try here and keep dividing the strips. So there's different ways you can draw this. But if I ask you in the exam or something like this for a tree map, then really use, this is a very basic thing, very predictable what you're going to get. It's easily constructed, and it does oftentimes a good job. You don't have to go to the extent of writing an optimization scheme. That's basically, but I wanted to make you aware of this. So basically, this is what I wanted to talk about today. So I'm a little bit early, I guess, but that's all I really wanted to talk about. So we learned a lot about hierarchies and edge bundling, and the way you can bring order to the chaos. So so I want to like spend a little bit of time on the final project that we talked about last time, right? So there seems to be some confusion when it comes to what are the deliverables for the proposal. So the proposal really, what I want from you is really think about how you're going to do this, right? Explain, if you get new data, which you are welcome, but some people already have very interesting data, explain what kind of questions you want your dashboard to answer. And maybe already come up with a little bit of a conceptual drawing what your dashboard will look like, okay? Like what are you going to put in your dashboard and what purpose will it serve, okay? So what purpose will it serve? So in your proposal, bring as much clarity. You will have to think about it anyway, right? So it's good to think about it early, okay? Especially because now we're not going to have this preliminary report, right? The preliminary report that we did in the class when we had like when we only had the small spring break, we actually, there was another step that was the preliminary step where you could get some feedback if you're on the right track. Now we don't have this. So really think about this in your proposal already, and really don't forget, you need to make a dashboard that fits on one screen, okay? And that is brushable, right? You have to be able to manipulate something in one of the tiles and have it reflected in all the other tiles, okay? Not only within one tile. I mean, there's these scatterplot matrices already can already be, it's already encoded in the D3 widget, right? That you can brush it within a scatterplot matrix, but that's not the only brushing. Please do the brushing across, right? Just like in the video that I showed. Okay, so I have a chat on here. You said to include how the dashboard looks like, but currently may not be able to visualize it. Well, why not? I don't understand why you can't visualize it. Currently, you can, I mean, the sky is the limit, right? You need to, all of these things you have to learn that, right? That's the whole point, right? This is very well supported in D3 that you can brush them, right? You take, you know, that's basically, you will, for brushing, you will always define like an area of points, right? In some way or the other. You may define a bar, like if you have a bar chart, you define one bar, and you have to know what points are contained in this bar, and then you figure out where all these points are in the other visualization. So you have to know that, right? And then you highlight them, right? So there's a program underneath that goes through like an event that is generated that will figure out, okay, this bar has been pushed, these points are in it. I'm going to highlight all the other points in all these other. We go through all the other visualizations in this dashboard and highlight them, or in some way or the other, or eliminate the other points that are not those points. You know, that's what it is. Or take a box around some points in a scatter plot and remember and then figure out what these points are, because you know X and Y within the X and Y. You know the X and Y coordinates of these points, right? You can figure out what they are, right? And then you can just look for these points in the other displays to figure out where how much of a bar is occupied by these points. You know, these points may only take 10% of this one bar or 20% of the other bar. Then highlight that, right? Bring out this 20%. Just like the video that I showed you in this by Ken, you know, that I showed in a lecture, or the dashboard I showed you in the lecture that I had a slide on, right? The baseball dashboard, right? Something like this. I know MDS is not easily brushed. Okay, so MDS plot, there's no way to tracking back the points into the you know, that is hard because it's optimized. Okay, so MDS plot you may not be able to do this, but PSA plot is easy. Right? PSA plot, there's a clear mapping from the low dimensional representation to the high dimensional space. That is easy. Okay, that you can do. Right? If there is a linear mapping, then you can do it. MDS, so MDS may not be. Parallel is also very easy, right? Because you know where the lines are, and then you can figure out where the points are in the other visualization. So you have to create a mapping. You have to know where the point goes in each of these different visualizations, and then map them and then highlight them, right? That's it. That's what you have to do. This is how these dashboards all work, right? And you need to implement this. So figure out, and of course figure out what visualization you really need to bring out the information that you want the user to find, right? You know, so look at this video by Ken, you know, that I showed in class, right? I can also link, I have it actually on YouTube, I can link you to it, I can link to it. It's a really nice way that really shows you the power of brushing, right? This is very simple, okay? So, you know, he did it as an undergraduate student, okay? So you better be able to do that too, right? And he did it, right? You know, so just, okay. Yes, you will get feedback. We will get feedback from the proposal. The proposal will get feedback. All of you will get feedback, okay? The proposal will give you feedback. Each proposal will get feedback to some extent, okay? So because there's so many, but now it's fewer students because you take groups of 2, you know, then it's better. But you will all get feedback, okay, on the proposal that you wrote. Okay, I'm not gonna that of course, you know, but try really do a good job. Like again, remember dashboard, one screen, no scrolling. Okay, no scrolling. Maybe if you need to scroll within an element, maybe you need to do that. But you know, outside you don't. Okay, and it is brushable. Think interactions in one tile will be reflected in the other tile. And also remember, MDS is hard to do, so you don't have to do MDS. PCA is okay. Parallel coordinate is okay. Any kind of radial display is okay, right? So try to mix it. Don't just have bar charts and scatter plots. Try to like have one little more complex thing and then justify the use, of course, right? So you know that's one thing. So the minimum number, okay, of records that the data need to have. Okay, no, not. I mean, I mean, it should be not trivial. No, I mean, it's if you have 250 sounds good. Someone says, is there a minimum record? You know, is it had a 250? I mean, 250 is a good number. You know, we're not looking for dimension reduction anymore, right? So now we're looking for interaction. Okay, so if it's 200, you know, just not a trivial small amount like only 10, right? That would be ridiculous. But you know, you can use now categorical. You can mix categorical and numerical. You know, that you can all do now, right? So you're not going to be judged on a number of data points anymore, right? I only wanted you to have sufficient number of data points so in for lab 2, so you could like demonstrate that you can sample it, right? And you can discover like what the different sample strategies, what they do to your data, right? That's why I wanted you to have more data points. Now it's okay. You know, you can also have like parallel. You can also use a categorical or numerical. You know, just use the right for the numerical. You know, there's certain things you can do, and for the category there are certain ways you can do, right? So basically try to do that. Then as for the group project, there was another question about the group project. So groups of 2 or 1 is there more required for groups of 2? You know, it turns out that as I looked at many projects in the past, I've seen lots of projects that only had like a single member project. They sometimes did better than the two member groups, right? So you know, at this point, you know, when you have no person, you have to, you know, some people work better in a group, you know, and some people work better alone, right? It doesn't matter, right? Some people are more efficient when they work alone, so they can do all the stuff. They can work late night, and then they don't have to share. They don't have to argue with other people about what they want to do. And some people like to bounce ideas off with each other, right? And they come up with better projects. So I will not. I will not require more from a 2-member group than from a 1-member group, right? So I understand if people have different work habits. The only thing I will require is that if you have a 2-member group, that both of you know what's going on, okay? There cannot be one member that does everything and the other member doesn't do anything, right? And gets treated for dinner every night, right? That cannot happen, right? We'll have an oral presentation, okay? Oral presentation. Maybe I split up, maybe I'll just do all of them by myself, but every one of you will be asked, okay? You have to both be present in some way, you know, in some way or the other, right? You can be like, maybe one of you is in one location, the other one is another location, but you both have to come to Zoom and be able to talk. And you have to split up, and I will ask you a question, both of you, about your visualization, and you have to answer that, okay? If you can't answer, if one of you is completely incapable of answering anything, okay, then this means that person has not done anything, right? And then you both will not get will get the lower number of points. So I want you to really have discipline and enforce that, right? I don't want, you know, please be together, right? Do it together, and do each of you talk to each other. And you do make a group, when you make a group project of 2 members, I really want you both be on board and be in the know what each other have done, right? Really want to do that. If you don't want to form such a group, if you want to split it up so only one person does one thing and the other person does the other and don't know what they do from each other, that is not acceptable, okay? You both have to know everything, okay? Maybe you didn't do everything perfectly, but you need to talk to each other, okay? I want a good conversation, good communication among the 2 of you, okay? If you choose a 2-member group. If you do a 1-member group, of course you have to know everything too. So, you know, so I don't want you to lift off the project from the internet, right? And then not know what the actual project does and how it's really implemented, okay? So I really will deal with this, right? So you don't go and copy a project from somewhere, from GitHub or whatever it is, and present it on your own, right? Okay, I will figure out if you did it yourself or not, okay? If you didn't do it yourself, I'm not going to give you any points, okay? I will be very, very clear on this, right? This must be your own work, okay? Don't forget about this, right? Cheating is no small thing, right? I want you to really do this yourself. You have enough space, time to do it, you know, and then it's not really that hard, right? But you have to do something, right? So don't just think, oh, this guy from visualization, you know, he'll accept anything. It will not happen. okay? I'll be very, very rigorous about this, okay? I want you guys to learn something, okay? And learning means you can't cheat, okay? Because I don't want people to go around and don't do the work, okay? Be unfair, because if you get a good grade but you didn't do the work yourself, it will be unfair to everyone else who did it, right? Then the grade of everyone else who did it is worth less because you cheated, right? So it's not acceptable, okay? I will figure this out, okay? Don't worry. I will figure this out if someone cheated. So don't even try, okay? Do the work and do it well, okay? Then you're gonna get a good grade, okay? So I will probably attend each presentation. Either I just do it all by myself, or I'll ask another person to join me, but I will be there, okay? You'll have like maybe 10 or 15 minutes presentation or something like this, okay? Now with Zoom, it's easy, right? Because we don't have to build boards around the hallway, right? We can just, make a schedule, and then people join the Zoom room, wait in the waiting room, and then present the project, demo it. It's very easy to grade, right? So final project, the final itself. So some more logistics on that. So I may not be able to do the final on the Tuesday in the last week. I may be able to only do it on a Thursday the last week. So we'll basically, it'll be online. Haven't figured out if I'll be using Blackboard. At this point, probably many of you have taken finals with other professors, and maybe you've experienced the locking mechanism, right, where you can't use other, where you have to lock down the browser, right, and then there's a camera, and you have to show yourself all the time as you do the exam, right, and have to first show your ID and have to show the room around you, that make sure that no one is in the room, right? So I may do the same thing, or I may do something else, but again, I want to really be clear that there's no cheating on the final either, right? So I may use a camera option with lockdown browser and clear ID that it's you who is actually taking the exam, and there's no looking away from on the smartphone or something like this, and no one has a headphone, right? So I'm trying to be rigorous here as well, okay? So that's basically all the logistical things, okay? So I'm really trying to enforce that you guys do what you pretend to do, okay? And that I want you to have fun. You can choose the data, any data you want, okay? And you make a proposal, give your feedback on it, right? You clearly know there's a dashboard, clearly know it has to be brushing, right? And dashboard has to fit on one screen. And you have to show that this dashboard actually serves a purpose, right? You actually can get some insight out of it, okay? Just like, Ken who did this New York City rental real estate analysis, right? He learned a lot, right? So you would want to create a dashboard that enables someone to learn something, and then you demonstrate it yourself, okay, to me, okay, on the video as well, okay? So that's basically it. If you have any questions, I'm hanging out 1 more minute. You can ask the question. If not, you can put it on Piazza. I'll try to respond as fast as I can. One more thing is this group building on Blackboard. Some people seem to have trouble with it. I'll look into this some more this evening, New York time, and try to resolve it. It's also a black box to me. I've done it last year and the year before. This year, for some reason, is more problems. I don't know if they changed something in the Blackboard system, but the past 2 years, it was actually very, very simple. So I'll research it, okay? So hope all of you are well, okay, and healthy, okay? Seems to be, the worst apparently is behind us, okay? So but be very careful, don't, follow the guidelines, social separation and so on, right? And be good, okay, be well. So I'll talk to you on Thursday next week. Okay, bye.